Now let's look at another level B challenge called heart. Now this question is quite interesting because the blocks are already given to us, we need to rearrange them. So let's have a look at the question first. It says, Aaron is distraught. Oh no, there are no more blocks left and those I used to make my heart shape have all been moved around. The task here is to rearrange the blocks provided to rebuild Aaron's program. The program should exactly draw the heart shape faintly below. Now the only information shown here is the hide menu button, which has been shown in almost every question, so that is not of any particular technical help. But it is quite helpful to look at the shape provided first, and also then to look at the different types of blocks that have already been filled out for us. Now, all we need to do is rearrange the code. This means that we do not need to specifically write any code or even modify any of the values or numbers provided here. So I'm just going to hide the menu quickly and zoom back in so we've got a little bit of space to work with this. Now, it's really important to, before you start moving blocks around, we look at the blocks that have been provided to us and try to figure out what each block is in relation to for the shape. So for example, there are 2 repeat blocks here. Each of these are moving forward and turning left for the same amount of moves and a similar amount of times that it is being repeated. Now, as you can see, a heart is a symmetrical shape. So this basically gives us the idea that one block of repeat code is in relation to one side of the heart and the other block is in relation to the other side of the heart. So we know that somewhere in our structure, there's going to be a block here and there's going to be a block here. And then we can start to think about the fact that we need to then fill the blocks in between with other instructions to allow us to create the shape correctly. Now, the first thing I notice here is my starting point isn't in the best location. This means I need to look at the starting location to be a more helpful location. Now, in this case, the intersection here is quite helpful. So before the turtle can start drawing anything, I need to move the position of the turtle back a little bit. This means I would need to use the pen up to avoid drawing anything, move back as I can see, which has already been provided for me here, and then put my pen back down. This means that I will move back without actually drawing anything, and then when my pen is put down, I'm ready to start creating my shape. Now, the rest of the blocks here are again our 2 repeat blocks, and actually if you look at it, there's only 4 other blocks that are of similar style left. In this case, move forward 130, another move forward 130. So I'm just going to move here and here just to sort of link it together. This means that these 2 sections of blocks are generally identical. Now, as you can see here, these are both turn right blocks, except the numbers are different. So it's important to understand that this block is, of course, turning right in a lot more degrees than this block over here. So let's, for trial and error sake, move this block here so that my pen or my turtle will turn approximately 180 degrees to the right from my intersection here. Now, I can run this, which is very helpful. But as you can see, because I already have pre-written repeat blocks, my code does start to execute those blocks, and that's not very helpful. So the way to do this, or to help us do this, is to disable the block. This then allows us to stop the repetition codes running just for the sake of us being able to test the code that we do feel like is the correct solution. So if I run this, you can see that my other blocks that I have not disabled yet are also affecting my ability to test my code. So I'm going to go ahead and disable everything except the 4 blocks that I would like to test. Now I can run the code, but I can also use the next step. So if I reset this, I can actually click next step and see step by step what is happening. Now in this case, I can see that the pen's moved up because nothing's been drawn between the process of me starting from here and moving back 100. I can see that moving back 100 has allowed me to reach this intersection. And of course now my pen is down. This means that any movement that I do make will actually create a line. So if I go to the next step, you can see that I'm now turning right by 180. Now remember, I just moved this block here to test, but I can see that 180 is the same degree that creates a straight line. So in this case, I can see that my little pointer is actually facing downwards, and that means in the next step, my heart will start drawing a line straight down, which of course is incorrect. This leaves me to look at the other turn right block and swap it around to have a look at whether 47 is actually the correct degree angle that I need to turn. So if I enable this block and I disable this block instead, I can now reset and use the next step button to see that actually now my pointer is pointing in the right direction. So I'm ready to draw. Now, again, using the process of elimination and disabling and enabling the blocks, I can see that I need to do something first before I draw this curve. Now, before the curve arrives, I can see that it's a straight line this way and a straight line this way. So essentially, I need to move forward. So I can see here that there are two move forward blocks, both that are exactly identical in terms of the number of steps that they move. So I'm just going to enable one of them, put them in, and then see how the code works. Again, you can run it quickly if you would like to test quickly, but you can also use the next step if you find that you're having errors or you want to go through it very slowly. Again, you can also slow it down in terms of the speed of execution through the slider. So there's lots of ways to help you debug your code. Now, I can essentially see here that I'm creating a curve. Now, it's kind of easy to see that the two repeat blocks now need to be used. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to enable it. Remember, apart from the 114 and the 113, there is hardly a difference between the two repeat blocks. So again, for testing purposes, I'm going to put this block in and I'm going to run it and see what it does. So as you can see, I've got my straight line, and now my repeat block is repeating a large number of times a certain type of line. Now I can see, even though it's doing it quite slowly, that it's at the moment successfully following the faint line to create the curved edge on the top right side of my love heart. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit just so I can get to the end of where my drawing is. And as you can see, I've now reached the top middle intersection. So this is really interesting because now I would need to use, knowing what this loop does, the second loop in order to create the second curve. So it's clear to see that my turtle was not facing in the correct direction before actually drawing. Now again, this means that I would need to use the only remaining turn right block, which most certainly wasn't the correct one when we used the previous one, and put that into this section here. So let me disable this block again and just test the turn right block and see what that does. Before using it, I would like to check that the loop will be correctly executed on the right part of the line. And as you can see, I know it's a little bit difficult to see because there is also a line drawn here, but now the location of the pointer is almost in the right direction, ready to start turning for my curve, which is of course my next repeat block. So I'm going to push that block up there and I'm going to enable it. And of course I can run this, but because this is the last block left, I'm going to enable that and put it in as well. Now let's run this at full speed. And as you can see, I have successfully managed to figure out how to draw this shape using the blocks that were provided to us before. How did that go for you? Were you able to figure out the answer? So let's have a look at the solution by clicking here. As you can see, we do have exactly the same solution. Now, the reason for this is because there is only one possible answer. This is clearly because of the fact that you are given pre-existing code and blocks, and you only are expected to rearrange them into the correct order. Therefore, this question only has one correct answer. Now, let's look at the explanation. It does clearly say here that it's important to get this perfect so everything lines up just as Aaron wanted. A difficult bug to spot is if the two loops are the wrong way round, the lines do not perfectly line up if the 113 loop comes before the 114 loop. But careful observation is required to see this when it is not marked as correct. So let's actually have a look and do that. So as we mentioned, there was a very slight difference between the two loops. The difference here was the number of times it repeats. So let's see the impact of swapping the loops around on the final shape of the love heart. So I'm just moving it around and I'm just going to run it quickly and let's see what happens. Now, as you can see, the lines at the end do not line up. And this is because that very faint black section there is that one missing step between 114 and 113. Now, you're probably thinking you could just change a 113 to 114 and add an extra step. But the trick to this question was that you needed to use the blocks given to you. So you weren't able to actually change that number to 114 and equalize it. And that's where this question was slightly difficult, because it needed to then be in the correct order. So let's move it back and make sure that it is in the correct order to avoid those two lines not aligning up and leaving that one small black space that is exactly equal to the amount of one step. Looking further at the explanation, it does say that the task has been changed, as this was the previous challenge, to bring it back to the intended level of difficulty. The provided blocks were completely separated, whereas now this is not the case. The text below applied to... So in the original challenge, even the loops had the code that was given to us inside correctly in the correct order separated. Of course, that would have made the question a lot harder, because it would have meant that you could have possibly swapped these two blocks around when filling in the correct order, and that, if we run it, would have of course caused another bug in your code. Okay? So as you can see, that one hasn't been marked correctly. So it therefore says an even more difficult bug to spot is if the move and turn blocks or in either of the two repeat blocks are the wrong way around, just as I demonstrated. At this point, the students debugging this problem need to notice that it's going to have a small effect. So it's really important to understand that really it does almost look like the loop and everything has correctly been replaced, because the heart looks like a heart. But if you zoom in, you can see that it doesn't quite line up, and you can see the faint grey line on the left hand side isn't actually matched up correctly. And this is purely because we've turned left first instead of moving forward. So this is a really interesting question, because it highlights how important it is to put blocks in the correct order, and also how small slight changes can impact your final solution, essentially making it wrong. So swapping those back means that that grey faint partial line that we can see is actually no longer visible. As we zoom in here, you can see that, and that's because those two small blocks being swapped over actually results from an incorrect answer becoming a correct answer. So looking back at the bottom, it does say that the two things that are really important to look at is the fact that we need to make sure that the loops are swapped correctly and that the contents of the loop are also swapped correctly. This means that the order of the answer is really, really important. And also, running the program at hair speed should get to the solutions quickly, which of course we did, because we tested it very, very quickly to see how our answer would show up. Considering that we obviously also have a time issue in this challenge, using that slider function is really helpful.